So my name is Tristan Davis, and I'm a program manager in the Office Extensibility team. And I'm really excited to be here in Taipei with you this morning. Interoperability and standards-based extensibility are a really core part of what my team delivers. And over the next 45 minutes, what I'd like to show you is sort of a broad view of the modern Office platform and how we allow third parties to come in and add things to Office and really integrate deeply into the products with the goal of helping users achieve their full potential. So many of you have probably played with Office in the past, and you're going to hopefully see a lot of new stuff. You'll see I have a Mac and an iPad and a whole lot of devices on stage. So hopefully some really interesting opportunities for you to dream up and build integrations that are really, really powerful and enable users to do things you never thought they could do before. So I'm going to talk about three facets of the Office platform this morning, and I'll dig into each one in detail. The first one is making your solution a native part of Office on every platform. So that's allowing you to add your UI, add your experience into Office where users are in a really natural, meaningful way. The second one is to build smarter apps by connecting to Office services. So we have a rich set of APIs that expose all of the data, intelligence, and relationships that are part of the Microsoft Cloud, enabling you to build that data and build that intelligence into your own apps, creating experiences that are more powerful than either one of us could achieve alone. And the third one is engaging users through conversations. We really see conversations as the next canvas for productivity. It's a natural language integration, and being able to sort of integrate with the way that users converse with each other is an incredibly powerful mechanism. We have a bunch of phase one integrations I'd like to show you today, and then you can imagine how in the future that'll become an even stronger part of how Office integrates with users. So most of you probably know who this guy is. I really love this quote, and it speaks to our team's mission. We really want to enable each and every developer to interoperate with the data and user experiences that are part of Office. And what does that mean? So really there are two pillars, and you kind of saw this in my agenda in the themes that I'm going to talk about. The first one is users. So there are many hundreds of millions of users that use Office every day. And our goal is to create ways for you to integrate into the flows that those users have in Office, so that rather than having to go out to another experience or another application, you can catch them and they can integrate with your experience right in the flow of what they're already doing and enable them to get work done right there in context. The second one is data. Like I said, by connecting to Office services, you're able to access all the data and intelligence that's available in the Microsoft Cloud and use it to create smarter, more personal experiences. And you'll see some great examples of what that means as I go forward. So here's, examples of you putting your UI into Office, where all the users are, and connecting to the data that offers Office in its cloud. So really, to give you a sense of that opportunity, here's a bunch of great stats that show the health and the growth of the productivity platform that we have in Office. I won't go through them all. You can read them off the slide. And, there are a couple that I really find to be my favorites that I want to call out. You can see that over 1 billion meetings are created per month in Office 365. And each one of those meetings is a rich entity that tells you things about the relationships between people. It tells you topics that they're working on together. It is signals that are incredibly powerful for building intelligent, smart experiences in your own applications. The second one is Microsoft Graph. So you'll hear me talk about this more later. But Microsoft Graph is really our single API endpoint to access all that cloud data in a single place. And it's already experiencing phenomenal growth since we released it in November of last year. So you can see our monthly growth recently was 420%, and that really speaks to developers coming on and finding value and excitement in all those data and all that signals that we provide in our cloud, and finding smart, intelligent ways to integrate it into their own applications and experiences. So let's start by digging into what it means to make your solution a native part of Office on every platform. Right up front, I'm going to say that I'm going to show you a ton of demos this morning, and I know I'm going to go a little quickly so that I can show you lots of stuff in the limited time we have together. Every single one of these demos is available on GitHub, so if you have a question or if you want to dig into the code or you want to actually pull some of that logic into your own thing as you participate in the hackathon, if you go to github.com/office dev, you will find everything I show here this morning and lots more. Fully commented code. And the best part is my team actually looks at those repositories. So if you have questions, if you have issues, if you want to make changes, you can go and do that and know that we're on the other side. We're looking at your contributions, we're looking at your questions, and we're more than excited to engage with you to make those samples even better. So how many folks here are familiar with Office add-ins? Most people? And I'm betting to a lot of you what Office add-ins means is COM or managed code VSTO add-ins that Office has supported for a very long time. One of the things we've recently announced with Office 2013 I'm really excited about is the next generation of add-ins, which are really based on standards. It's really web technology built into Office. So you can see a modern Office add-in really consists of two things. It's your own web app, and that's HTML and JavaScript using any framework that you find that you like, using any JavaScript coding technique that you like, nothing proprietary to Office. If you know how to build a website, you know how to build an Office add-in. And then a very small, simple XML file that tells Office, hey, here's how to integrate this web app into the Office experience. Here are the applications to show it in. Here are the places to show it in the UI. And then we'll do all the magic of showing your web app in the appropriate places inside of Office. And all of this, as you'll see later, and you can probably guess by the Mac and the iPad that are up here, works across platforms. So really, the power of this is you can write one add-in that will work across Windows, web, Mac, iOS, without any special code. You don't have to customize things per platform. Your add-in, your experience will travel with users across devices, across experiences, in a natural, seamless way. So that's a lot of talking, and I know that everybody here probably wants to see some code. So let's jump into some samples, and I'll show you kind of what that means in practice. So this is an example of an add-in that I've written for Excel. And you can imagine in this scenario, I'm a developer at Woodgrove Bank. And I know my users use Office to do things like budgeting. I know they have Office on their phones, on their PCs, on their tablets, and I want to find smart ways to integrate Office into the workflows they already do. The first thing I'm going to show you is an add-in for Excel that lets them pull all the data from my bank into Excel so they can analyze it, they can annotate it, and they can work with it using a tool that they're already familiar. So what you'll see here as Excel boots up is that what the Woodgrove Bank's actually done, or what I've done, is I've created my own tab in Excel. It's indistinguishable from the built-in commands that are right there in Excel, but it adds all the commands that me as the bank wants my users to have to work with when they're in that application. And I can, for example, click on the welcome button, and you'll see that we'll load up my add-in. We'll execute some code to insert a welcome screen. Maybe I have a command to import transactions, and that's going to call back to my database, pull some content in JSON format, and then expose it inside of Excel. So here's a neat Excel chart that I've created of their expenses, and then here's all the details of those expenses splayed out right there within the app. I can create some dashboards, perhaps. So I'll click that, and you'll see that I create a bunch of additional tabs in that Excel workbook that let me do things like, here's the categorized expenses that the user has, or here's a place where they can track follow-ups, or they can track donations. And now back on that dashboard, you could imagine that I might say, oh yeah, that's a donation, and I want to track that for my taxes. I can click Add Donation. We'll highlight it, and we'll add it right there to that donation sheet. I can come back here. I can say, ooh, those look like two identical transactions. I should follow up on that. I can click the Follow Up button. That'll get highlighted, and it'll get added to another worksheet where I can go look later for potential follow-up that I want to do to make sure that maybe they double charge my credit card or something. So what you can see here, hopefully, is that this integration feels really native to Excel, right? It's almost indistinguishable from built-in functionality of Excel, and yet all I did, now we can jump back to the code, is wrote some really standard JavaScript to accomplish that task. So minimize some of these other task panes so that we can see. So you'll see that all of this looks really familiar, both as an Office developer and as a JavaScript developer. So here I am. I can, for example, grab the welcome sheet, grab the range. I can auto-fit rows and columns. I can protect it with something as obvious as worksheet.protection.protect. I can activate a given worksheet with an activate call. That JavaScript, hopefully what you're seeing is it looks incredibly simple, but gives you incredibly deep access to all those capabilities inside of the Excel application. And if I jump over here, you'll start to see that really simple manifest file that I mentioned. So here's that manifest file. And it's just really simple XML that tells me things like, hey, what's the name of the add-in? Who created it? In this case, it's Microsoft. What's its version? what application should it be supported in, workbook, and gives me all of those hooks, and then lets me hook up the button. So I can say, hey, when you click this button on the ribbon, just go execute this JavaScript function, and Office will do all of the work of making sure that's all stitched together and the code executes when the user asks for it. So that's an incredibly simple example, but hopefully it gives you a sense of the power you'll get from our modern web-based add-in infrastructure. So I'll stop that guy. Now let's jump over to Word and look at an add-in there and how simple it is to integrate with the ribbon inside of Word. So I'm going to open this clause library application. This is another sample that we built on my team that shows you how, for example, a law firm might use Word to store common clauses. Or, hey, we have a set of phrases we use in all of our documents. I want those to be stored centrally and versioned and managed as a unit. And as it loads up, you can see that I've created a couple already. What it's going to do is it's going to log in. All of those snippets are stored in a SharePoint list as individual entities, and then any user who goes and wants to pull that data in can just click on those clauses, insert them into their documents, and we'll be able to use them in a standard, obvious way. So, I've created a couple of clauses with add-ins in Graph. Maybe Office add-ins are awesome. Oh, I want to use that in this document. I can click here, and it gets inserted into the document's content. Same thing with Graph. Now, you saw in the Excel example that this task pane is really neat, and it's a good way for the users to access the data, but I want a button on the ribbon that is how they access that task pane, because I want that functionality to be exposed in a way that users are used to using Office, which is clicking buttons on the ribbon. So let's go see how simple it is to make that happen. So I'm going to close Word down. I'm not going to save this document. Again, here I am with that XML manifest. All I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll to the bottom, and I'm going to insert the pre-canned XML for that ribbon button, and then we'll walk through it really quickly to see how simple it is to create in the first place. So here's the snippet. Close these guys so we have a little more room on the screen. So what you're going to see is that I've basically said, hey, I want to add some UI to document, which is Word, where documents are written. I want it to be an extension point on the primary command surface, which for Word is the ribbon. Maybe I want to add a button specifically to the References tab, so that's where I figured users are going to find my UI is on the References tab. And then it's as simple as saying, here are the icons for that button. Here's the label and tooltip for that button. And then when it's clicked, I want to show that task pane we just saw. And here's the location of the URL that hosts that task pane. So as you can see, maybe about 20, 25 lines of XML, and I've just told Word, put a button on the References tab, give it this icon, and show open this task pane when the user clicks it. And what you'll see now, if we restart and run that add-in again, is that rather than being a task pane which is opened automatically, if I jump over here to the References tab, right there next to all of Word's built-in commands is the clause library button to open that task pane and let Word work with those clauses they already created. So really cool, and in about 2 minutes of writing some very simple XML, I've taken my existing solution and I've nailed it right into Office in the right place, enabling users to feel like, again, it's a built-in function of Word. It's indistinguishable between what are the commands the application offers natively and what are the commands that I'm creating as an add-in on top of it, which I think is really, really cool. The last thing I'll show, so you saw Excel, you saw Word. I really want to show you the cross-platform support that I talked about earlier. So I'm going to open one more add-in in Word. This is a really sample add-in, so it just is designed to show off the capabilities of Word. So I'm going to go to my add-ins tab here. I'm going to say, hey, I want to open this Word.js sample. So this is a sample that shows the depth of capability we have with integrations with Word with our JavaScript APIs. So I can do things like I can insert pre-canned content. Maybe I have a template. I want the user to insert that template in a single click. Maybe I want to add paragraphs of content that come from a database. I can do that. Maybe I want to change the logo up here so you can see right now I don't have a picture. I can go and find and set the look of pictures inside of the document. I can go and search out. So you see this is in the consulting services for Contoso. Let's go and tag those, because maybe I want to change that based on the customer I'm actually writing the document for. I can go and I can change that in real time. So change that from Contoso to Fabricam. I can go insert pre-canned files of content. I can even search. So let's search for everything that starts with a dollar sign that looks like a price and highlight that. So you can see here great examples of the depth of capability that are offered with the JavaScript API for Word. Even if I had this guy, you can see I can even go and play with things like the header and footer. So maybe I want to put a footer that says confidential. I can do that with the API as well. So that's really cool. But the interesting part is let's take this very same add-in and look at it across platforms. So for example, if I unplug this guy and I come over to my MacBook, let's open Word for Mac, create a document there. And then one of the things I'm really excited to talk about is that less than 2 weeks ago, we actually announced support for those same add-ins inside of Word for Mac with 100% parity with what you saw in Word for Windows. So I can go back here. I can insert that very same Word.js add-in. So I'll go grab it from here. And just like I did in Word, I can insert a template. I can add paragraphs of content. I can highlight the customer's data. I can change it. I can insert files of content. I can search for prices. That's the very same add-in that you saw running on Windows, running the exact same code in the same way for a user who chooses to use the Mac. And I can go even further, so I can jump over to my iPad here, and I can say, well, maybe that same add-in should work on an iPad, so if a user wants to create those invoices on the go. So here's my iPad. I'll boot Word there. What you'll see is I can open the document. I can grab that very same add-in and insert it here. Shrink it down a little bit. And those same steps you saw on the PC on the Mac, that same add-in and that same code is running here on my iPad to perform the same functions with no customization, nothing specific that I did for any one of these platforms. So hopefully what you get out of this is we've really embraced that cross-platform capability of Office and allowed you to write a single add-in with HTML and JavaScript that will run everywhere the user wants to access it, whether that's the PC, whether it's Mac, whether it's on an iPad, or if I jump all the way back to my PC here really quick. Even in the browser, so if a user wants to use Word online, they can do those again, those same JavaScript capabilities, that same add-in running inside of Word Online in the browser. So very, very cool, and hopefully demonstrates our commitment to cross-platform capability within Office and your ability to access users wherever they are, whether that's mobile, whether it's PC, or whether it's Mac. So super cool. Like I mentioned earlier, you can kind of see our roadmap here. Really excited to announce the Word and Excel for Mac support that we released about 2 weeks ago. Very, very soon now, you'll see PowerPoint for Mac joining that family as well. And then over the coming months, you can imagine that we'll also have add-in support in OneNote Online. So we announced that in developer preview at Build last month. And add-ins coming to more and more places on Outlook as well. Whether it's iPad, whether it's Compose add-ins in Mac, whether it's iPhone and Android, we really want a user to not have to think about choosing between a specific platform and a specific Office experience and all the awesome integrations you guys build that go along with it. What's new? A really long list of stuff that we've released that I'm excited to talk about. I mentioned add-ins in Outlook. Those add-ins also work in Outlook.com. So you have 400 million users of Outlook.com you can also target with your add-ins. That ribbon extensibility, support for Mac, more APIs. The list goes on and on. I encourage you to go look at our developer portal, dev.office.com, where we sort of keep a running list of all the great stuff we're releasing for you to take advantage of to really integrate your productivity solutions into Office. Second bucket, build smarter apps by connecting to Office services. So really this hinges on something called Microsoft Graph. And Microsoft Graph is designed to be our single API for accessing all of the data and intelligence in the Microsoft Cloud. So all you have to do is build an application that authenticates with Microsoft's standard OpenID OAuth 2 endpoint and accesses the REST endpoint graph.microsoft.com, and you have access to a users and groups in their directory, their email, their documents, their notebooks, their calendar, the insights and inferences generated by the Office Graph, the people they work with, and even, I'm really excited about this one, as of 3 weeks ago, you can actually drill into the contents of Excel workbooks. So I can go through that REST API, find an Excel workbook, and then just with that REST call, append /workbook/worksheets, and I'm digging into the data and knowledge inside of that Excel workbook from my REST endpoint, and either reading it to pull into my own experience or perhaps writing to it. You can imagine, for example, a sensor that automatically wrote readings into Excel. And then a user can just go boot Excel and use their great analytics and pivot tools to create all kinds of smart knowledge about what's going on with that particular device. I'm going to give you a quick demo of some of what that means in practice with something called Microsoft Graph Explorer. So just like your app's going to call graph.microsoft.com, you can actually visit it right here in the browser. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can hopefully see what I'm doing. I'm going to click this Graph Explorer. Graph Explorer is just a simple visual tool that lets me make those REST calls against Microsoft Graph and see the kind of data it returns. So I'm going to sign in. Maybe I'll sign in with my Microsoft account. And what you'll see here is I can, as simple as calling /me, get the data that's stored in our Azure Active Directory about me as a user. So there's Tristan. I can, just by appending /manager, see information about who my manager is in the organization. That's Brian. I can, as simple, with the same API, just switch that manager to messages. And now I'm calling off to all the data that's stored in Exchange from my mailbox. I can go and pull that. I can filter it. I can pivot on specific inputs. I can jump back and change that to events. And then now I'm querying my calendar and getting all the knowledge and insights that are available on my calendar. I can even do things like, if I go to our beta channel here, say, hey, Office, based on all the knowledge you have of my calendar and my email and the documents that I'm writing, who do I work with? And what will happen is, using the data and knowledge of Office Graph, it'll come back and say, here are the people you work most closely with. So Rob, Rolando, Brian, these are all folks on my team, and Office magically knew these are the folks I work most closely with on a regular basis. I can also say, hey, what documents are potentially interesting? So the people I care about, what are they working on? And again, we'll go out and it'll find, hey, here's a bunch of information and documents that are happening in your universe that contain potentially interesting content based on the people you work with on a regular basis. I can also say, I can go drill in, for example, to a file. So here's a workbook that I happen to have in my OneDrive. I can even go and say, hey, what are the permissions on that? And get back a list of permission sets and who has access to that specific workbook. And hopefully what you're seeing here, in this case I'm the only one that has permission, is that one API gives you access to a wide variety of data stored in the Microsoft Cloud, so you can mash it up, you can put it together in ways that I can't even imagine yet. Really, the power is all yours, like whether it's who's in and out of Office, what the files I have are, what the data I have is in Excel, who my manager is, and what the contents of my directory are. All that is available from a single endpoint and a single API that you can easily incorporate into your own applications. Let's look at a couple more examples of how that might be used in practice. So if I go back and I'm Woodgrove Bank again, this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to build an ASP.NET MVVC app. You saw that workbook we created from Woodgrove Bank with all of my data about the transactions that I have. In this case, with a few lines of code, and we'll show you what those are, I can go in and say, oh, I actually just want a web app where I can log donations. So maybe when I'm on my phone and I'm out on the go, I'll go and donate some money. I want that to show up in that same Excel workbook that I used to connect to Woodgrove Bank itself. So you can see here, I'm logging in with our standard OpenID Connect OAuth 2-based authentication. And what it's done is via a couple of really simple REST calls, it's now dug into the contents of that Excel workbook that we created and pulled out all the donations. I can even say, so let's jump over and look at what that looks like in. So now I'm going to access my OneDrive up here. I'm going to show you that very same workbook that MVVC app is showing right in Excel Online. So let's scroll to OneDrive and open it up. And open it in Excel Online. And you can see that same set of donations that I've got here. So these donations by month and all the details that's showing up here. is also showing up in this custom app. Now, you'll notice I've got this guy. I'm going to open him up in Excel Online as an editor, just so that we can watch. The coolest thing about this Excel REST API available through Microsoft Graph is it acts just like a user. So if I say, hey, here's my transaction details, I go back to this app, I say I want to add a new one. Let's say, for example, today, I donated $144.67 to an example company. I'll click Add Donation, and what we're going to do is we're going to call that REST API and say, hey, go find the table of donations and write the data for this particular donation right there along with everything else. And if I jump back, what you'll see is just a few seconds later, that data is going to pop in real time into that spreadsheet as I'm working on it. So that Excel REST API, and you can see it show up right there, example company, $145, now acts like another co-author inside of my Excel spreadsheets. And while the user's working, I can be pulling data from disparate sources, I can be writing from my own app into those same Excel workbooks, data for them to consume. So super cool. And if I jump back over here and kind of show you how simple that is from a code perspective. Close some of these extra windows. One more. All I'm doing is I'm calling that same graph.microsoft.com endpoint that we just talked about, calling the Drive API. So I'm saying, hey, I want files in my OneDrive. And then hunting down a specific workbook with a specific name. And once I know that name, it's as simple as appending /workbook/worksheet donations. And now I'm digging into the contents of that particular workbook in my OneDrive through a RESTful API without knowing anything about the way that workbook is stored, so it can be stored using our standard OpenXML format. I'm completely abstracted away from the details of that XML and just working with a simple RESTful JSON-based payload for the content in that spreadsheet. And I can either get data, like I did when I opened the app in the first place, or I can post data in. So you saw I added a donation, that was as simple as a post saying, hey, here's a particular table, here's a set of values, go and push those into that Excel spreadsheet as well. So hopefully what you can see and what you find as exciting as I do is Excel's now essentially a data source and a data sink for all the data you're creating in your own third-party applications without you having to get your hands really dirty and understand all the concepts in Excel's file format. You're just using the tools and techniques that you use for any other RESTful API on the web to do that. This is one more simple add-in that I created to kind of show you how you can combine both the capabilities of Microsoft Graph, so those RESTful APIs that we just talked about, and all the capabilities that are available inside of add-ins to create one coherent, cohesive experience across that whole spectrum. So in this case, we'll hide the ribbon really quick. I'm going to say, hey, I wrote an add-in, and that add-in is going to authenticate against Microsoft Graph. It's going to get the user's identity, call Microsoft Graph, call out Excel REST API, find the details of all of the charts inside of that workbook, and then let me insert them into my PowerPoint document to use in a presentation. So I click Connect to OneDrive. You'll see that what I'm using is our standard JavaScript display dialog API. So I'm saying, hey, JavaScript, give me a dialog box and show this HTML. In this case, it's the HTML of our standard authentication endpoint. I can click Sign In. And then we'll authenticate, we'll authorize, and we'll get the token. And what will happen is now, through a single call to that OneDrive API, I found all the Excel spreadsheets in my OneDrive. I'm going to choose the Woodgrove Bank one that we've been looking at. And again, through another single call to that Excel REST API, it's going to go pull back all the charts that exist in that workbook. And once those are back, I can click on any one of them and just say, hey, insert a picture of this chart into my PowerPoint document. So here are all the charts. Maybe I really like this one. I'll say insert. And you'll see that immediately gets inserted as a picture into the spreadsheet. And then even cooler, PowerPoint will come along and say, ooh, I see you inserted a picture. Here are different ways that slide might look that will make that picture pop inside of your presentation. So now what you can see is, again, more blurring of the lines between the capability you're using to extend Office via HTML, JavaScript, and REST, and the native capabilities of those applications themselves to deliver the user this super seamless experience. So now in just a couple clicks, I was able to create an add-in that authenticated the user against Graph, let them pull details from their Excel workbooks and insert them into PowerPoint, and then PowerPoint took that and ran with it to create a really interesting native slide that I can then present to my colleagues and coworkers. So, again, hopefully you can kind of see the power of this. Super exciting examples of how you can extend our productivity experiences to create really awesome in-the-flow experiences for users. And I talked about this with add-ins. Microsoft Graph, I'm super excited. As of a couple weeks ago, we announced a bunch of additional capabilities on Graph. So that is both the support for webhooks. So if you imagine if you were writing an application against Outlook and you want to be notified every time a user got a new email message or a new calendar invite, you can use standard industry webhooks, register for notifications on that user's mailbox, and we'll call you back when something shows up. You can build applications that span both Office 365 and commercial users, and Office Consumer and OneDrive.com and all the consumer services, as well as we're building out a rich set of SDKs for all the languages you want to use. Just like with add-ins, I said, hey, it doesn't matter what framework you choose, if you want to use Angular, if you want to use ASP.NET MVVC app, whatever you want to do on the add-in side, we similarly want you to use the tools and techniques you're familiar with to connect to Graph, whether that's .NET or iOS or Android or Ruby, Python, Node.js. We're going to have a set of SDKs that span all of those languages and let you build in the place you're most confident and most familiar. You're also going to see over here on the preview side a ton of new APIs. I'm personally really excited about the Excel REST API, but things like find meeting time, which says, hey, here's 4 users. Tell me times that they could all meet. And Office will use its data to calculate the best times for those people to meet. We can do things like who's in or out of Office. So you can imagine a scenario like I build an application that needs a signature from a user. I could first call the Microsoft Graph and say, hey, has that user set their out of Office message? Because if they have, I should probably tell the user submitting that user's not in Office right now. You should maybe contact their manager, again through Microsoft Graph, to ask them to sign instead. So you can start to stitch together just a couple of really simple REST calls into a powerful experience that wasn't possible before. So really cool stuff. Last bucket is engaging users through conversations. So you've heard a lot about us talk about conversations as a sort of a new platform, and it's really an exciting new ecosystem that lets natural language become an extensible user interface, right? So users are used to having conversations in Outlook and in Skype, and we want you to have all those capabilities and be able to integrate into the places where the users are having those conversations. So what does that mean today? Well, we've already announced a couple really exciting things. So a few weeks ago, we announced our Office 365 group connectors, which I'll show in a second, which are a way for your applications and your services to post conversations into the places in Outlook where users are already having discussions. And the second one is Skype for Business's web and mobile SDKs, which will let you use Skype's audio and visual capabilities to embed rich, interactive AV capabilities into your own mobile and web apps as well. So Office 365 connectors. This is something we announced a few weeks ago, just before build. And as a really simple, again, webhook and JSON-based backend for you to post data into Office. So the user can say, hey, I want data from this service to show up in my Outlook group. And by authenticating using standard OAuth and getting a webhook, you can now post conversations into the place where the users are having their own conversations in a way that gets your data in front of them in an incredibly simple and natural way. What does that look like? Really easy for you to put rich content in there. It's a webhook polling architecture. Users are staying in sync, right? So you're having activity in your service. Rather than the user having to remember to go out to some separate service to find out what's going on, you're saying, hey, I'm just going to post conversations right there into Outlook so that they know things are changing. My own team, for example, we spend a lot of time looking at Stack Overflow because we want to answer all the great questions you ask in the community. Every time a question is asked, we're posting a conversation into our Outlook group so that all my team has to do is constantly look at their Outlook, and they know what's happening out there in the community in Stack Overflow. They know what's happening in Visual Studio Online with the contents of our builds. All those disparate tools become a single source of truth inside of Outlook, which makes them much more efficient on a daily basis. And then messages, as you'll see, will arrive in a standard connector card format. Very consistent UX. The users understand immediately how to use it. They can find that important content and actions. And it's consistent, again, between what we'll do as a first party for experiences that we build at Microsoft and what we'll offer to you as developers to do as third parties. So you get the same depth of integration, you get the same capabilities that we're building for ourselves. And that's a really important statement across everything you saw today. So let's look at a couple more demos. So I'm going to go to the Outlook developer portal, dev.outlook.com. I'm going to say, hey, I want to build my very first connector with you guys right now. So we're going to go to something called the Connector Sandbox. And what the Connector Sandbox does, and you can go play with this anytime, is you can say, hey, I want to connect this sandbox to my Outlook groups, and then I want to actually see and play with the JSON that's getting pushed into Office to see all the different things I can do and immediately see if I change this, this is how the user sees it inside of Outlook. If I change this, this is how the user sees it inside of Outlook. So I'm going to connect here. I'm going to sign in again. And then what we're going to get is just a really simple JSON payload for that connector, for that integration, which you can go and tinker with and see what the result is going to be when the user sees it inside of Office. So I'll say, hey, I want to show things in my team issues group, and we'll jump to that in a second to see what it looks like in context. Once I've given it that permission, you can see here, if you're familiar with JSON, some super simple JSON that we have for the contents of that connector. So here I'm going to create one that says new comment by Ben Quilliam on Fabricam forum, and then just some data on who created it, the date, the priority, etc. If I click here on preview, we'll show you. This is what that JSON will look like inside of Outlook. And then I can go and say, hey, let's push it in to see it actually happen in Outlook. If I jump over, I can see right here inside of Outlook, as soon as I posted that connector, the user got a message inside of their Outlook where they're already doing their day-to-day work with the contents of that JSON message. And if I were to jump back and change something, for example, like, let's change this one to say, I commented on DevDays 2016. Connectors are awesome. What you'll see here when I preview it is those changes are reflected inside of that card that's going to get posted into Outlook. And if I post that message back, a few seconds later, if I jump back over here to Outlook, I'll see it in my inbox. That message will show up just like any message any other user sent me. So you're getting, here it is. Tristan Davis commented, connectors are awesome. So now with some really simple JSON and an incredibly simple webhook, you're pushing your data, your information into Outlook where users are already having conversations. Same way that this happens with first-party services. I'll show you really quick. For example, we've got a ton of integrations that we've already built. We have a great one with Trello, for example. So here's a Trello board that maybe my team creates. I've got a DevDays board. I can go and say, maybe my team tracks stuff inside of Trello. Here I am. I can say, hello, everyone. This is a connector, right? And as soon as I'm creating these things, Trello, through that native integration, is now able to push the changes to those cards right back into the place where I'm having those conversations. And you can see that as soon as I come back, here's Trello saying the new card was created inside of that DevDays list. And here's the one called This is a Connector. And now the user, without having to leave Outlook, knows those changes happened in Trello and can jump to Trello to take action on them. They can have discussions right here in Outlook about them. There's no need for them to think about hitting multiple tools. All that data comes to where they already live, which is inside of Outlook. I think incredibly simple but incredibly powerful integration for you to get your data in front of users where they already live. Last thing I want to show, and then we'll wrap it up, is Skype. So the other place where we have amazing conversation assets is inside of Skype. So really excited to announce a couple things related to Skype. Skype now has a user API that gives you access to the contact status and conversations that happen in Skype. Same way that you would authorize an application for Microsoft Graph, you could say, hey, I want to access the contents. Oh, it's easier if you see it all the contents that are available inside of a user's Skype. And then on top of that user API, we've released 2 SDKs. A web SDK that lets you use all of that data plus the audio-visual capabilities of Skype inside of your own web apps, and a separate SDK for Android and iOS that will let you do the same thing within a mobile app. So if I jump back to my Mac again really quick, is a really simple mobile application that I've built in Xcode, where with about 10 lines of code, I've integrated that Skype mobile SDK to create a really powerful experience for Woodgrove Bank's mobile app. So we'll close Word, jump over to Xcode here, and what you'll see is that what I'm going to do with Skype is I'm just going to have a couple of lines of code to initialize that mobile SDK. So I'm just creating the Skype manager. And then down here, I'm going to say join meeting, and I'm going to hook up to the action of a button inside of my iOS app, connect to this meeting URL with the user's display name, and turn on the meeting. And what that's going to do, now if I take out my iPhone here, what you'll see is that app, I've compiled it onto my iPhone. Woodgrove Bank has a mobile app. They want their users to be able to see all their transactions on the go, so I'm going to log into that app. And you'll see that Ask Agent button down at the bottom. And now that join meeting functionality I added with the Skype SDK, all the user sees is a simple button that lets them connect to Skype. And what's going on in the background is we're running those couple of lines of code. We're using all the audio-visual capabilities of Skype, and we're going to be able to have a live video and audio conversation built into my app with only the SDK and about 10 lines of integration code. So this will hopefully come up pretty quickly. I know a lot of us are using the Wi-Fi, so it's a little tough on Wi-Fi right now. What you should see is that that agent should see me joining any second, and then I'll see his picture and he'll see mine, and Woodgrove Bank can now have their agents having live interactive conversations with those users without having to think about their own AV stack, their own capabilities, et cetera. They're just using the Skype capabilities that already exist today. So there I am talking to that agent there at Woodgrove Bank. I can say, why are you charging me twice on my credit card for that transaction earlier? And we can have a really rich audio-visual-based conversation without me having to think about any of that conversation capability, outsourcing it all to Skype. So really, really cool. Thanks, Donnie. All right, so hopefully you guys got a quick sense there of all the capabilities available in the modern Office platform. I showed you a whole bunch of stuff, I realize, in a quick 45-minute session. But if you take anything away, it's that Office really has opened up capabilities on both an interoperability and extensibility side for you to access our user experience and our data, whether that's on a PC, on a Mac, on an iPad, on an iPhone. We really want you to pull our data, integrate it with your own, and create experiences neither one of us could have dreamed of alone. So very cool stuff. Oh, and then I'll jump back here. Last thing I'll say before we're done. Oh, you're not seeing that. Let's try again. Last thing I'll say, and then I'll get off the stage, is we're here to help. We're here to help this week. And even when we're done and we go back home, we have a ton of tags on Stack Overflow if you have questions there. My team's right there to engage. We have a great set of podcasts on dev.office.com. We have a great web video show on Channel 9. There are tons of resources available to you, and my team is super excited to help you build things that integrate that Office data and those Office experiences to create really powerful things that help our shared users achieve their full potential. So really excited to see what you build this week and going forward, and really happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Davis, for the excellent speech. Thank you very much.
So my name is Tristan Davis, and I'm a program manager in the Office Extensibility team. And I'm really excited to be here in Taipei with you this morning. Interoperability and standards-based extensibility are a really core part of what my team delivers. And over the next 45 minutes, what I'd like to show you is sort of a broad view of the modern Office platform and how we allow third parties to come in and add things to Office and really integrate deeply into the products with the goal of helping users achieve their full potential. So many of you have probably played with Office in the past, and you're going to hopefully see a lot of new stuff. You'll see I have a Mac and an iPad and a whole lot of devices on stage. So hopefully some really interesting opportunities for you to dream up and build integrations that are really, really powerful and enable users to do things you never thought they could do before. So I'm going to talk about 3 facets of the Office platform this morning, and I'll dig into each one in detail. The first one is making your solution a native part of Office on every platform. So that's allowing you to add your UI, add your experience into Office where users are in a really natural, meaningful way. Logic into your own thing as you participate in the hackathon. If you go to github.com/office dev, you will find everything I show here this morning and lots more. Fully commented code, and the best part is my team actually looks at those repositories. So if you have questions, if you have issues, if you want to make changes, you can go and do that and know that we're on the other side. We're looking at your contributions, we're looking at your questions, and we're more than excited to engage with you to make those samples even better. So how many folks here are familiar with Office add-ins? Most people? And I'm betting to a lot of you what Office add-ins means is COM or managed code VSTO add-ins that Office has supported for a very long time. One of the things we've recently announced with Office 2013 I'm really excited about is the next generation of add-ins, which are really based on standards. It's really web technology built into Office. So you can see a modern Office add-in really consists of 2 things. It's your own web app, and that's HTML and JavaScript using any framework that you find that you like, using any JavaScript coding technique that you like, nothing proprietary to Office. If you know how to build a website, you know how to build an Office add-in. And then users. So there are many hundreds of millions of users that use Office every day. And our goal is to create ways for you to integrate into the flows that those users have in Office, so that rather than having to go out to another experience or another application, you can catch them and they can integrate with your experience right in the flow of what they're already doing and enable them to get work done right there in context. The second one is data. Like I said, by connecting to Office services, you're able to access all the data and intelligence that's available in the Microsoft Cloud and use it to create smarter, more personal experiences. And you'll see some great examples of what that means as I go forward. So here's examples of you putting your UI into Office, where all the users are, and connecting to the data that offers Office in its cloud. So really, to give you a sense of that opportunity, here's a bunch of great stats that show the health and the growth of the productivity platform that we have in Office. I won't go through them all. You can read them off the slide. And, there are a couple that I really find to be my favorites that I want to call out. You can see that over 1 billion meetings are created per month in Office 365. And each one, the second one is to build smarter apps by connecting to Office services. So we have a rich set of APIs that expose all of the data, intelligence, and relationships that are part of the Microsoft Cloud, enabling you to build that data and build that intelligence into your own apps, creating experiences that are more powerful than either one of us could achieve alone. And the third one is engaging users through conversations. We really see conversations as the next canvas for productivity. It's a natural language integration, and being able to sort of integrate with the way that users converse with each other is an incredibly powerful mechanism. We have a bunch of phase 1 integrations I'd like to show you today, and then you can imagine how in the future that'll become an even stronger part of how Office integrates with users. So most of you probably know who this guy is. I really love this quote, and it speaks to our team's mission. We really want to enable each and every developer to interoperate with the data and user experiences that are part of Office. And what does that mean? So really there are 2 pillars, and you kind of saw this in my agenda and the themes that I'm going to talk about. The first one is, one of those meetings is a rich entity that tells you things about the relationships between people. It tells you topics that they're working on together. It is signals that are incredibly powerful for building intelligent, smart experiences in your own applications. The second one is Microsoft Graph. So you'll hear me talk about this more later, but Microsoft Graph is really our single API endpoint to access all that cloud data in a single place, and it's already experiencing phenomenal growth since we released it in November of last year. So you can see our monthly growth recently was 420%, and that really speaks to developers coming on and finding value and excitement in all those data and all that signals that we provide in our cloud, and finding smart, intelligent ways to integrate it into their own applications and experiences. So let's start by digging into what it means to make your solution a native part of Office on every platform. Right up front, I'm going to say that I'm going to show you a ton of demos this morning, and I know I'm going to go a little quickly so that I can show you lots of stuff in the limited time we have together. Every single one of these demos is available on GitHub, so if you have a question or if you want to dig into the code or you want to actually pull some of that